There we go. All right. How is everybody? I could tell by people's faces. So David, you're at least smiling, and Michael, you're okay. Now you're smiling. You're. I know everyone's excited about the exam today.
So excited.
Yes, absolutely. So is everyone in the middle of midterm hell at the moment? Are there a lot of midterms or group activities that you're in the kind of in that flow of doing at the moment?
Group projects are hitting hard with the transition to online. Different time zones has been rough.
Wow. Yeah, you might have some people in different time zones. Wow. Okay. We'll talk about the group project in a second. We'll make sure everyone gets on. Let's see. 18. We'll give everyone another minute to get on, and so hopefully everyone's turned in their exam, which is great. We'll talk about the IKEA case a little bit later. Yes, so let me get going here, and we'll. So I look forward to tonight. So we've got a couple of chapters to cover tonight, which I posted this a couple of days ago, so you guys can go through it. You know, these chapters, it's a lot of pages. So, you know, if you kind of, in the areas that I'm focusing on, you can kind of keep your studies a little bit more, you know, a little bit more manageable. So tonight, we are going to stop roughly at 9 o'clock. You guys, actually, I will, during the break, I'll make the exam active. You guys have from 9 till 10:15. So like I said, this exam should take everybody between 20 and 30 minutes, 40 minutes if you're really pushing it, but I will wait till 10:15 if anyone is still taking the exam to ask, you know, if you have a question to ask. If I know that, you know, all the exams have been turned in, then, or, you know, scored, then we're good to go, and I'll sign off. All right, so tonight we're going to cover measuring brand performance. So up to now, we've kind of created all the building blocks of branding, from understanding, you know, the vocabulary of brands, the brand positioning framework, or the customer-based brand equity pyramid that Keller talks about. We looked at brand elements. We looked at secondary associations. We looked at how we use the 4 Ps to enhance our brand, whether how we price, where we distribute, how we promote, and how we really talk about the product itself. We looked at the different communications tools that we have to develop creative strategies to communicate our brands in certain ways that will resonate with our target audience. And we've also looked at how this works in kind of the digital era. And then now it's how do we measure brand performance, both qualitatively and quantitatively, and looking at a couple of models and one commercially available brand measurement tool that is that's actually a really good tool. You know, the IKEA case was originally a cold call case, so I have a couple of you targeted, but all of you should be able to jump in on IKEA. We will stop the conversation at 9 o'clock wherever we are with IKEA. But I do want to you know, discuss it so you guys have a sense of things that you know, will work. I'll do a little summary of it early next week after we have our speaker, and that's good. Next week we're doing the Samsung case study, and Samsung is it's an awesome case. It's a rich case. Not complex, but it's really rich. There's a lot of angles to it, so look at the questions. That's a cold call case. So so those of you who are still, who have volunteered, you're less likely to be called. But those of you who haven't been speaking a lot in class, aside from the folks that have not, that were unable to volunteer for a case, but if you haven't spoken a lot in class, be ready for to potentially open as well. All right, we're going to talk about brand architecture strategies. So when we're managing a brand, there's different dimensions of how we manage it, whether it's a single brand, a portfolio of brands, and on the hierarchy of how we communicate, do we call it, do we work with individual brands like at Frito-Lay, where you have Lay's, Doritos, and Fritos? Do you have endorsed brands like Kellogg's Corn Flakes? Do you have corporate brands like Citibank? And everything in between. So really understanding the strategies and how companies decide. And there's no right answer in how we structure brand architecture. The reading next week is How Customers Think in the Brand Report Card. And remember, there's going to be 2 readings. And remember, we deferred because we're there's 11 chapters that we're going through to the final exam. There'll be questions on the final exam on those 2 readings that we deferred. And so next week, Mark Lindner from Miller Coors, or from Miller Brewing, as part of Molson Coors, will be speaking to us. He is, he's riotous, and the problem is he does a great job on, virtually, but in person it's quite a fun evening. The good news is we have 2 other speakers lined up, which I'm very excited about, which I communicated on November the 5th. So the following week, we're going to have the CEO of Red Door Interactive, one of the largest digital agencies in San Diego, talk about branding and how agencies look at brands. And we'll talk about working with agencies from the agency side of the world. And then technically on the last night of class, the founders of Nixon are going to be speaking, and it's possible they might come the night of November the 19th, as opposed to the December the 10th. But they prefer to come on the last night of class. It's a great little capstone for everyone in that regard. So that's where we are. Just a quick question for everybody. How are group projects going, since when you pivot out of this midterm, group project is due on the 19th, so we're talking about 4 more weeks away. So just want to make sure your teams are going to start scaling and up that process. Does anyone have any questions on the group project for the moment? All right. Last thing, so all the lectures, there's a couple of standalone chapter lectures that I did for the spring that are still valid for this semester. So I won't record extra stuff, but we have all the lectures except for 1 week, which I stupidly I stopped the recording and did not record that session, but everything else is up. There's, I had a couple of copyright issues with ads that we showed. So the copyright owners, if I want to publish it, they don't want, I'd have to pay royalties or whatnot. So they've removed, for the chapter 5-6 lecture, they removed the one offending commercial. So that's available. There's one more, so George Clooney, if you guys remember that ad with the Swedish or Norwegian bank, clearly somebody who owns that copyright and doesn't want us to kind of publish it. So that once that gets exercised from the presentation, it'll be available so you guys can look at it at your leisure. But all the presentations, as you know, are in the course document section of Blackboard. So you have access to all these presentations. All right. So let's talk about the objectives for tonight on the lecture side. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk, it's really important when we think about class measurement and about research is really, it's so important. Don't underestimate, marketers, really successful marketers ask a lot of questions. And that's why, research is in the purview of our function in marketing. Don't underestimate the value of asking the obvious. Because it can actually be seen as perceived as genius because everyone has the question, but someone has to be courageous enough to ask the question. So you know, be that individual. Is it only me that don't see the recording on the course documents? I only see the PowerPoints. Yeah. So the course documents. So the recordings are in YouTube. So there's 2 to record. You could see the dates. There were several months ago, Ruth, that I just recorded some of the lectures, because what we did is we doubled up on cases in some classes, and so I just recorded the lecture, posted it, and people can go check it out. So all the recordings are on our YouTube, which I sent everyone the link. All the PowerPoint presentations that the recordings are based on are in our course documents section. All right. So
thank you.
You're welcome. So we're going to talk about the following things. We're going to talk about the brand value chain. Very important for you guys to listen to, because I would suspect that between 9 and 10, it'll be a very important thing for you to know. The brand tracking studies, because you know, from a brand marketing perspective, we need to know how we track our brand. There's a lot of qualitative and quantitative techniques that ultimately allow us to have, you know, richer insights into our brand, into our marketing activity. But brand tracking studies, I want to pull those out, and then we'll talk a little bit about a commercially viable option called the brand asset valuator model from WPP. Young and Rubicam is the agency in WPP that owns that asset, and it is a compelling asset. So you as a marketer, when you're out there, you could do custom research, you could do by syndicated research, so research that people do as a whole and then sell the research, or you could buy commercially viable products and tools to track your performance. So a lot of different options that you guys have as a marketer. All right, so let's talk about the brand value chain. Minimize the thing here. So the brand value chain, there's 4 value stages of the brand value chain, and then there's a multiplier effect that enhances each stage based on whether what you can control, what the consumer affects, or what how the market impacts you. So there's a program multiplier, customer multiplier, and a marketplace multiplier. So let me take you through the value stages. Okay, the first stage is, what is your marketing plan? How are you investing behind your marketing? And this is the only stage of the value chain that you as a marketer control. Everything is out of your hands once you execute your marketing plan, period, end of story. All right, so this is how you define your product. What are the communications tools that you use? If you go to market, do you go, what's your distribution channel? What kind of trade relationships do you have to get your product or service showcased appropriately? Your employees. We can talk a lot about employee branding, and do you have the right team in place in order to deliver a marketing program that's successful? And then a handful of other things that you can control. Once you execute your marketing program, the next stage that you influence is that customer, is your customer, prospective customers, current customers. You influence their mindset. From a brand standpoint, remember, we affect attitudes. So anything in relation to getting people to know the brand, having the right set of associations, having the attitudes that predispose you to being considered or preferred, that attachment, which is degrees of loyalty, and how active that attachment is. Are you, like an evangelist for the brand, or are you just, someone who buys it periodically? Really critical. Okay, so as you move to the next stage of the value chain, which is market performance, now this is how the market judges your brand. What kind of market share do you have? Have you done both line extensions or category extensions? Is your margin structure and profitability good? can you command a price premium? Are you, can you command, depending if you're a competitive category or you're in a super luxury category and the price premiums can be huge, but let's say a 10 or 15% price differential from your competition, right? And then if you have to take a increase in price, do you see a drastic change in volume? So if your brand is price inelastic, meaning that you could take price increases, still maintain a price premium, that's an incredibly good vote of confidence from the market with respect to all your marketing activities and the value you've created for that brand. All right. So is everyone with me up through these 3 stages? So this stage is the measurement stage from a marketing perspective. And then the grading stage is the shareholder value. You have a high stock price. Do you have a good PE ratio? What's the market capitalization? If you look across, let's say, certain industries, if you are AT&T stockholder, stock price sucks, PE ratio sucks. Your market capitalization for the size of your business is relatively low. And compared to a company that generates a fraction of the revenue, like an Uber or other technology companies whose stock price and PE ratio is stratospheric, right? So those are the value stages. So as a marketer, someone's got a question. At Tesla, absolutely. Yeah, the value of Tesla is bigger than the value of General Motors. So excellent point, Rachel. So those are the value stages. Now, the multiplier effect is the difference between the lead in which you create versus the market. And Apple's a great example here, because what Apple has done is even though they have a relatively small share, they have an important share of the global cell phone market, but 75–80% of the units sold in the world are Android phones. Yet Apple, even for a minority market share company, Samsung sells a lot more phones than Apple. But the value of Apple, their marketing program, the price premiums they command are extraordinary. So if you look at it and you look at it in their space, you look at the clarity of the marketing program, the relevance to the customer, the aspirational value, how distinct and how consistent they've been throughout their whole existence. Sony, for example, really has a negative multiplier here, because their marketing program is not very clear. Their product sets are not very relevant. And think about next week when you're reading for Samsung, and think about Sony and look at the competitive landscape and where Sony was in the mid-2000s and where Sony is today, and think about the product categories that they were #1 in, and are they #1 in those categories today? How distinctive is your brand in the eyes of the consumer, and are you consistent with how you deliver that? That really affects that mindset. And so consumers then, the relative level of loyalty becomes huge. And you're looking at, if I, think about, as we go through Apple, they just announced a couple of weeks ago their new lineup of phones. How have other cell phone manufacturers responded, and how do people line up for Apple launches? They don't do that for Samsung launches, who is really the biggest cell phone producer in the world, or any other brand. The channel doesn't discount Apple phones as much as any other Android phone, and people who are Apple people are very vocal about their love for Apple. And then the last component is, if we deliver strong market share, good price premium, inelastic pricing structures, so when we have to raise price, the market shrugs it off. That multiplier is important in terms of the growth potential. So you look at the, they call them the FANG stocks, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google. So, a huge growth potential. In fact, so much growth potential that the U.S. government this week filed, antitrust litigation against Google for being too dominant in the paid search market. The contribution that the brand brings. So I posted, as you guys saw, the next level of the top 100 global brands. There was a big shift in the top 5. All of a sudden, Google dropped from number 2 to number 4. Microsoft went up number 3, and Amazon just leapfrogged to become number 2. Still a long ways away from Apple, but Amazon has really, challenged brand superiority in the space. And the growth of Amazon was 60%. The brand value growth was 60%, which is, it's rare when you're coming from a high position, being one of the top 10 brands, 60% growth, versus being, brand number 70 or 80 and growing 60 and maybe going from, 70th position to 55th position. So this is a really big deal. So we'll take you through an example with Starbucks. Starbucks is a really interesting player because, they really grew through non-traditional means. As I think I mentioned on the first night of class, coffee was really in big trouble in the late 80s, early 90s. People weren't drinking coffee. People over 55 were drinking coffee. Young people were drinking sodas in the morning, or other alternative beverages, iced teas, things like that. Coffee was in really big trouble in the supermarket, and there was no kind of premium coffee experience until Starbucks came along. And they took a page out of how they serve coffee in Italy. And for any of you who've been to Italy and have been to a bar in the morning to get your cappuccino or your espresso, it is a completely different experience. The guy who is making your coffee owns the place. He knows who you are. He knows how you like it. And there's, it's kind of a very intimate feeling. And so Howard Schultz came in and said, I'd like to kind of create a version of this here in the United States. Similar to the Gap, he expanded into non-traditional outlets, whether he sold Starbucks coffee on planes and in ports for big cruise lines, in supermarkets. There's a Starbucks literally on every corner. But what he did is he really created that experience where he offered free Wi-Fi, he had music. The size of the Starbucks were actually relatively large, so people just can come in, chill out, have a coffee, but it really drew people in because, you pass by and it's like, this place is full. This stuff must be good. And off to the races you go. So they had huge word of mouth. They, one of the first things that they sold besides coffee were board games and music. And that's because they wanted people to kind of stay. And so they really grew incredibly fast. And from a multiplier effect during this time, there was nothing like Starbucks. There's a lot of small competitors, but no big competitor until recently, Dunkin' Donuts or McDonald's, which sells coffee. And even though McDonald's coffee has been rated by Consumer Reports as the best drip coffee product in the market, better than Starbucks, brand preference was really critical. So there was very little competitive reaction to their higher end coffees, the espressos, the lattes, the frappuccinos, any of that ilk. Even though there's companies out there like Coffee Bean or Peet's, they were a distant second. And these guys really focused on a major corporate brand strategy, and they were a driver in changing the market to being more favorable to coffee, as there was a decline in per capita consumption of soda. And soda was still the number one consumed beverage until about 2015-16. But soda was so far and away consumed over any other product in the United States, whether it's water or tea or as energy drinks became popular or coffee. But now things have changed because of concerns for health. So let me share with you. Let me get to, if I can get to the whiteboard for a second, and I'll come back to this. I'm going to share with you some interesting information of how Starbucks has been crazy successful. So in a period of 10 years, if we look at I'm gonna, oops, and then if we look at units, so we look at units, we look at price, this is stock price, and then we look at market capitalization, all right? Just so you guys can see. In 93, when they kind of launched, they had 272 units in the market, whereas by 2003, they had 8,569 units. The stock price in 1993 was $2.78 a share. Whoops, not 27 cents, $2.78 a share. And in 2003, it was $16.40 a share with multiple splits. So the stock price was over $50 a share from $2.78 a share. The market capitalization was $621 million in 2003, and by 1993, sorry about that. And by 2003, the market capitalization was $9.7 billion. So you can see how the multiplier effect in this particular instance, I'll go back to the presentation, the multiplier effect was extraordinarily impactful for a brand like Starbucks. And then if you do the research and you look at what maybe Tesla or some other brands that are more recent, you'll see some substantial growth, but it's as opposed to their market capitalization is insane given the amount of cars that they sell. So when we look at this, and a couple things. One is the copycats around the world that kind of look like Starbucks, and then Starbucks also evolved. They, people criticized this move when they changed their logo, whether it was on their coffee cups, on the, outside of the buildings and so on, to have, Starbucks coffee, and you have kind of your iconic mermaid character there, from the old logo to the new logo. So they kept the color, but they focused on the woman, which is quite fascinating. And so physically outside the building, yes, it'll say Starbucks coffee on the building, but where they have the logo on the cup, it is just the logo. So if they can make the move from being able to drop the name, awareness is not a problem. It's kind of a certain degree of resonance. So really important to know. And we have to consider, was it a mistake? Was it a good choice? And there was a lot of debate when they did that initially. It's worked out for them, but initially there was some criticism in the marketing press. All right, so now I'd like to share with you how all these models link together. Okay, so we start with Keller's brand resonance model, and basically the customer-based brand equity pyramid. And we know at the very base of the pyramid is all about brand salience, which is brand awareness. And at the next level, they break it out between brand performance, which are rational benefits, and brand imagery, which are emotional benefits. And within those list of benefits, there are things that are common to the category. So they're points of parity. So please don't confuse that I have the arrow pointing to brand imagery for point of parity. It's for the whole, that whole slice of the pyramid. And the points of difference are the things that are distinctly known by you. So Keller literally folds the pyramid on itself because customer judgments and customer feelings. Customer judgment says, are the brand promises, do they meet the standard? Do I believe that this product is superior in how it performs to the competition? Do I have a positive feeling toward this brand? Overall, and what should those feelings be? And at the top is consumer or customer brand resonance. That's the active loyalty of the brand. The brand value chain operates at that level. I don't want consumers who are habitual consumers. I don't want consumers that are fundamentally, that they're willing to switch. Call these Ethiopian coffee. Okay, thank you, Ruth. So we'll have to click in and check that out in a little bit. The brand value chain operates at the highest level because that multiplier effect makes loyal customers. And we'll talk later about different degrees of loyalty and different degrees of attachment. That's the goal. So all this stuff is connected. So whether you use the brand positioning framework, the brand resonance model, or the customer-based brand equity pyramid, we call it, or the brand value chain, they're all connected, but the brand value chain operates at the very top of that pyramid. And the brand positioning framework is the alternative to the customer-based brand equity pyramid. All right. So if we're thinking about brand tracking studies, there's two things that I want you to think about. First, before we even do a brand tracking study, we have to be able to ask the right questions. So we have to do a brand audit. We have to look at really in depth. So if you're the new chief marketing officer at a company, you have to know what information is there, what insights are there, and do you have a long-term strategy in place or brand positioning? If you don't, you have to fill the gaps. One of the ways to fill the gaps in terms of gathering in-depth information is, setting up a tracking study. How does my brand evolve over time? Is my brand strengthening? Is it holding steady? Is it eroding? Very important. It's so critical that you have to collect information from your customer base at at a similar point in time. So a lot of times brand tracking studies, depending on the size of the company and how fast moving your product category is. So if you're a Coke or a Pepsi, you're doing brand tracking studies every quarter. If you're a manufacturing company, you might do it once a year. So if you're Siemens, if you're GE, you might do it once a year because you're selling humongous, big ticket items. And so your brand, doesn't move overnight unless you're Boeing and you have a crisis like the 737 MAX. So if they're doing brand tracking studies, they're looking at consumers because, if you guys read the paper this past week, and I know you guys are doing all these group projects, but American Airlines cleared the 737 MAX to fly. So I'm asking you, let's say, you're going to go visit somebody and you take American Airlines and all of a sudden, you find out, well, what plane is flying, and it's a 737 MAX. What are you going to do? Are you going to board? Are you going to change your flight? Are you going to cancel your flight and take a credit for another day and book it on Southwest, right? So important that you track. So what do we track when we do brand tracking studies? We look at brand awareness, and we'll talk about the two different types of brand awareness, and brand image. And then we want to track the sources that make up brand equity. So are they strong, favorable, and unique? And then even if we're looking at individual brands, like Lay's potato chips, or a corporate brand like General Electric, the whole thing with GE is it's a little bit of a different animal, because here we have to, because the brand represents every division of a company, whether I'm selling refrigerators at GE or I'm selling jet engines, or wind turbines. They're a huge manufacturer of wind turbines, right? So you have to ask slightly different questions in terms of tracking. The notion of is how easy is it to do business with GE, because a lot of their customers are corporate customers. How concerned is GE with its customers? Are customers the most important thing? How approachable is the brand? Is it aloof? Is it approachable? Is it engaging? And how much do you like doing business with the brand? So a little bit of a different animal if you have a corporate brand versus a non-corporate brand. And then brand preference. Brand preference is very critical, and there's a couple of stages of brand preference. So first of all, there's awareness. The second stage is consideration. Consideration says, if I'm thinking of buying, like we did that, the little thing where you guys gave me your 3, quick service restaurants. It plays a little bit on awareness, plays a little bit on consideration, which says, if I'm thinking of buying a product or a service in a category, which brands do I think of as part of the ones that I'm going to consider buying? That doesn't mean that someone can't, insert themselves at the last minute, but you're going to have a set of consideration first before you say, I prefer this brand over that brand. So when you're designing the survey itself, these are the areas that you're going to have within the survey. So we want to know how people are aware, and as we've said, there's unaided awareness, and unaided awareness says fundamentally, if I ask what brands in a category come to mind, unaided means you're going to recall that brand specifically. If I say, what brands of soft drinks do you know? You might say, well, I know Coke, I know Pepsi, I know Dr. Pepper, I know 7-Up, I know Sprite. I can't think of any others. And then I'll say, well, what about A&W root beer? Oh, yes, I know A&W root beer. That's aided awareness. So aided awareness, it's important because aided awareness suggests that your marketing is working somewhat. Unaided awareness, it's working really well. We look at brand usage. We say, okay, how do you use the brand? What part of the day do you use the brand? Do you use the brand multiple times a day? Whether it's a product or a service. The brand judgment. What are my opinions about the performance of the brand versus the competition? How well does the brand perform versus competition? From an imagery perspective, if I'm selling Coke versus Pepsi, I'm selling Coke, Coke at the wedding, Coke at a family beach gathering, celebrating in the stands at a soccer game. Pepsi, concerts, music, nightclubs, it's all geared toward youth and dynamism. So a very different set of imagery for both brands. And those conjure up certain feelings. So how do I feel about this brand? Do I like the, mostly it's around liking and loyalty. And then resonance is the whole notion of, once I say I like the brand, what level of liking. If you like it above a certain level, now we're going to ask you about loyalty. So those are the kind of the format structure for a brand tracking study. And usually a brand tracking study from, might take, depending on how quick and dirty versus how much in depth, can take anywhere from 8 to 10 minutes to as many as 20 or 25 minutes to complete by the user. Most people today, when we talk about quantitative surveys, do online panels, because now, it used to be online panels until about 3 years ago, unless it's a really well-known and used category, were kind of iffy because you couldn't replicate a true national sampling. It used to be people went what they called and did mall intercepts. So they would go to shopping malls all over the country and literally, look at quotas of people, older, younger, ethnicities, whatever it is, to kind of say, here's a similar dimension for domestic, the domestic population. But now finally, panels have become pretty aligned with the national structure, which is good, and it makes it way cheaper. So when we structure a tracking study, how do we structure a tracking study so we can effectively measure the right individuals? So depending on your tracking study, one of the things you might want to do is track, existing customers and understand whether they are light, medium, or heavy users. They use your product a lot. They use your product on a regular basis. They occasionally use your product. I really want to know, and you want to know why people just use you periodically versus use you all the time. So when Facebook says, hey, our users log on at least once a day, people check their mobile device at least twice a day. Our users are very relatively heavy users. They spend a lot of time on Facebook, and so how do I look at that behavior versus people who might go once every few days just because they want to see what friends or family has said, right? I'm tracking loyal customers versus price sensitive customers because I want to make sure that I understand that people who are loyal and my evangelists, why, but also why people who are price sensitive, how big is that segment, and why don't they want to engage the way loyal customers do? Really smart marketers that have, and unfortunately for better or worse, if you have a big enough budget, it's non-customers versus rejectors. So people who don't buy, why don't they buy? And people who bought you and left your franchise, really interesting insights. Why didn't you meet their expectations? So very important. When and where to track. So I need to do tracking studies on a regular basis, and I need to do them at the same time. And the reason is, if you put a tracking study in the middle of a major marketing campaign, you're cheating, because you're hopefully going to have more response because you're in the middle of a campaign. If you say, no matter what, I'm going to conduct a tracking study in March, June, September, 3 times a year. All right, and then January, so 4 times a year. And on the same date every quarter of every year, whether you have a marketing program in that particular quarter at that time, doesn't matter, because it'll smooth out the aberrations. There'll be some quarters where you don't have a marketing program, some quarters that you do, as long as you're consistent when you track. But if you try to track during a major marketing activity, you're going to get a lot of false reads there. I want to look at, the frequency of how often I track. Some people are, during different parts of the year, during summer, during Super Bowl, other, the NCAA basketball tournament, a Budweiser, or these big beer companies might be tracking weekly. If you're a certain brand, you might be tracking quarterly or once a year. And one of the most important things is as long as you're tracking over time, what you're going to find, unless there's a major crisis in your brand, is the shifts in brand awareness, unaided and aided, brand imagery, brand usage are subtle and over time. So looking at, data over time is really, really critical. When I was at Frito-Lay, what we found is that over a decade, the consumption of salty snacks went from an average of about 2 pounds a year per person to 14 pounds a year per person, peaking at the age of 23. So when you're 23, you are eating 23 pounds of salty snacks a year. And then it starts to decline as you age. Now, you can't understand that from one year to the next, but it impacts how you then brand, how you market, what kind of products you launch. So really important. The last thing I'll tell you is, what are some of the rules of thumb from a marketing perspective of acceptable measures? So awareness levels So total awareness, oh, there was a question. Who, there we go, hold on a sec. I'm showing the slides via Zoom. Are other people not seeing my screen? Are you guys seeing the, so if you would message in the group chat, is anybody else not seeing my screen? You guys are seeing, okay. All right, so, sorry, Austin?
I only see the slideshow.
Okay, you are seeing this show, okay. So I'm on a slide, it should be on slide 10, yes, thank you. All right, so you know, sometimes if you minimize it and go back out, it might pop back into the screen, this slide that we're on. So anyway, so let me go back a slide. So I was saying, what's the minimum acceptable thresholds? So a couple things. You're doing pretty well. You know, you're kind of in the game if your overall awareness, so aided plus unaided, is north of 60%. You're below 60%, you've got an awareness issue. So brand new brands, you know, it doesn't count because brand new brands, you're starting to build awareness from zero. But if you're a digital native brand, you can build awareness much faster. You know, brands like Uber, brands like, you know, that Amazon, they went really fast, you know, versus, let's say, Amazon versus a Barnes and Noble or other brands that had to advertise to get people to a store. But regardless, you know, once you're kind of north of 60% total awareness, that's pretty good. Unaided awareness, yeah, Stephanie.
Is there any point in which a brand becomes so powerful that they don't need to track it anymore or really do this?
Great question. So there was a time in the early 2000s that, you know, Nike, they called it the swooshification of Nike, that the swoosh was everywhere. So if you're that ubiquitous, when you have 95, 99% overall awareness, and even unaided awareness is well north of 50%, why do you need, you know, you are getting to the point where people either are not engaging with you or it might have a negative effect. Now, to Nike's credit, because of the way they market their campaigns, they kind of are on the cutting edge of controversial. They were able to keep their brand relevant, but it's very seldom where you just want to coast. You can, if you have a really strong brand, and let's say, you know, your company's on a cash crunch, and maybe for 6 months or a year you back off your marketing activity. Yeah, you know, you could do that. I'll give you guys an example. Every year without fail, at PepsiCo, Frito-Lay, which is the profit driver of PepsiCo, always has to cut its marketing expenses in the fourth quarter because Pepsi is never meeting their financial commitments because of their competition with Coke, right? So probably in the 10 years that I was at PepsiCo, I think only 1 year we didn't cut our marketing budget in the fourth quarter. So now, as I'm planning this, I'm like, you know what? I don't want to have big campaigns and programs in the fourth quarter of the year. I'm going to do fairly light marketing activity. In fact, I'd rather not even have marketing spend because I don't want to give it up to Pepsi. I'd rather spend it more in other quarters of the year. So I was always fairly not doing much in the fourth quarter of a year on whatever brand I ran. It didn't hurt me. But if you go naked for, you know, 6 months to a year, you'll start seeing shifts. So as I mentioned, 60% total awareness, and on unaided awareness, if you're north of 25%, you're starting to build real brand equity, and your brand should be a leading brand in the category. It may not be the leading brand in the category, but you should be a very viable brand, and certainly against the lesser brands in the category, you should command somewhat of a price premium. So that's kind of the status on that. Now, one of the challenges that we have as marketers is our brand doesn't live in a vacuum. We have to understand what's happening overall in the environment. One of the things that we do that nobody else does in a company is you have to have a true long-term value at how we think about the brand. We're the ones that are responsible as marketers to understand, are we on the cusp of obsolescence? Are there new substitutes that are coming in the same way in the electrification of cars? The big auto manufacturers, kind of thought, hey, these electric guys, kind of a novelty. And now by 2025, the vast majority of auto manufacturers are going to have their cars being electric. And that is there a substitute? Is there a paradigm shift? What's happening in the market? So we have to look at what's happening with economic indicators, retail trends. So if you're in commercial real estate right now, and this is not as much of a branding issue, you're in really deep trouble because of COVID. There's going to be retail stores that are shutting down, restaurants that are shutting down, companies that have most of their employees in an office building are saying, you know what, you could work at home. I don't need the same amount of space. That's going to change drastically what's going to happen with the real estate that is going to be abandoned, right? Is there an opportunity for certain brands to do stuff? In fact, today in the Wall Street Journal, Rudy Kalanick, who's the founder of Uber, they're literally doing, they call them ghost kitchens, where they are buying up or renting large blocks of abandoned real estate to use them to do kind of industrial kitchens for like the taco truck kind of concept, and so they can go to different places and they don't have to have but they have one big kitchen, different products that they produce, and then send people out to be in places where people will congregate. So there's technology. What are the trends and usages, particularly at work and at home nowadays? What's happening in media? We know that media is being fragmented. There's a big, shift in cutting the cord with respect to cable and satellite, in favor of more streaming. How is the demographic profile of the country changing, whether it's in large cities, across the board, educational levels, degrees of immigrants and non, for example, the percent share of the Caucasian population is going to be by 2050, 60%, which says it's going to be a very different country in the way we engage, and there's going to be different values, different traditions that'll be introduced that'll make the country better. But it'll be very interesting to see how this evolves. So you have to be looking at this at that degree of level of how's it going to impact your business, products and services, attitudes and values. What's happening with consumer confidence now. So consumer confidence the last 2 months has been kind of increasing. It's still at a low since 2009-10, and from March until August, the long-term part of the consumer confidence was dropping like a rock. So the last 2 months, that's kind of rebounded. So people are feeling better about the long term. They feel horrible about the short term. Whereas at the beginning, the short term thing, most people thought that their layoffs were going to be temporary. Not anymore. So the short term piece is now way worse today than it was at the beginning of of COVID. So a lot of stuff. What's the context of your brand? And then who's responsible for your brand? And so making sure that there is a senior person in charge of proactively being responsible for your brand. So Scott Bedbury, in one of the books that I recommended, and what I call traditional, it's a little bit an older book, but Bedbury was the chief marketing officer both at Starbucks and at Nike. And so, and he is a disciple of top-down brand leadership. So like we looked at Dove at creating that brand building group, brand development group that was at headquarters, that was in charge of the brand worldwide, and the brand building group was in region to implement that strategy and market. So you have to have a brand champion. who anticipates, who researches, who listens, who informs. And this is going to be super important, by the way, as you read the Samsung case. Then we need to have a holistic approach to developing a brand review process. There we're always tracking, do we have the right research in the field? Do we have the right initiatives? How are we doing in the core initiatives for the brand? What are we learning both positive and negative about the brand? And then are we seeing conflicts in our brand positioning? Right? And then I have to kind of codify that into a clear guide to develop a brand equity charter. Normally, I bring in class a brand equity charter that I developed at 20th Century Fox for our satellite television business, which is in part a brand guideline, so the creative side, but it also tells our countries who launch Sky what the brand is and what the brand isn't. And that's one of the most important things, is especially if you have a global brand and there's country managers or marketing leaders in different parts of the world, it is so easy to let the brand go. And it's so critical to make sure that people know what the brand is, but what the brand isn't, what you shouldn't do. And then ultimately, what's my brand report? What kind of things am I tracking over time? Sales trends, category trends. What's my category and brand development index? So in the category that I compete against, let's say it's frozen food, how is the category developed in different parts of the country? So that's my category development index. Let's say frozen foods sell extraordinarily well in the center part of the United States, not so much on the West Coast. My category development index is low in the West, but very high in the central part of the country. But my brand development index, in context of the category, I might be doing really well from my brand standpoint. So even though people on the West Coast don't use a lot of frozen foods, the frozen food they use are my frozen food, but my brand might be weak in the Midwest where the category is really strong. So you have to understand in context of the category that you sell in, how well developed it is in different parts of the country, and how developed is my brand in context of the category. So really important that we have to track. Yes, question.
So a good example of that would be Jack in the Box. It has a large presence on the West Coast, but the Midwest is where more fast food is consumed, but it isn't really spread there or recognized there.
Partially. So let's say, if our brand development index on the West Coast for Jack in the Box is really super high relative to the category development, and low in the Midwest, but the category is well developed, they're missing an opportunity because, like you said, Matt, Jack in the Box kind of goes from the West Coast and kind of peters out toward the Midwest. So they have Midwest locations, but they're into Colorado. There's some areas, but they really don't hit the core Midwest of Missouri, Illinois, up and down that basin. So it's partially correct but if I'm Jack in the Box and I see that the category is extraordinarily well developed here, I need to have a strategy. How do I expand in those areas and be relevant versus whoever the competitors are in that space that are very well developed? It's not good if I'm very well developed in a market that is a healthier market. People are looking at fish tacos, they're looking at vegetarian choices, and while I have a strong brand development index, I can't capitalize on that. So fair point. So one of the most important things, as I mentioned, is you have to be able to ask the questions. So this is a cheat sheet. So a couple of slides ago we talked about the context. So the economy, the category, what trends are going to make you obsolete or whatever. Here is what are the research questions specifically about the brand? Who buys our product? Who makes the decision? Who influences the decision? What are the needs that are satisfied? Why do customers choose a different brand, the specific brand? When do they buy? So one of the interesting things is, I'll go back to my Frito-Lay days. For when I joined in the late 80s, 65% of total salty snack category sales happened from Memorial Day to Labor Day. So between early September and mid-May, our plants went from running 3 shifts a day to 1 shift a day. It's a horrible way to, it messes up your profitability. So what did Frito-Lay do? And this is Frito-Lay. So you have to thank Frito-Lay specifically, and to some extent the beer companies, for March Madness, for all the craziness around Halloween, because candy was okay, and the candy guys, but going in alternative products, holiday parties, because Frito-Lay had to figure out, how do I get people to eat snacks in different parts of the year? And so they create these tentpole events that help drive up snack purchases. But I could tell you, March Madness is an invention of Frito-Lay. So, how's our product perceived by customers? What are the demographic factors that are influencing our purchase decision? So a lot of different things, so as you're looking at, what questions do we answer as you frame your tracking study or any other quantitative study, making sure you know the answers to these questions as a marketer is going to make you a more successful marketer. Okay. So when we think about measuring sources of brand equity, there's two parts. There's qualitative research techniques and quantitative. So qualitative, we'll talk a little bit about these different types of qualitative research techniques, whether it's focus groups or free associations or brand personality and values, or a variety of experiential methods. So qualitative just says that I'm talking to a few people, but I'm talking to them very deeply, and I'm going to peel back the onion and get hypotheses that I can test quantitatively. Make sense? Then I take these hypotheses and the questions that we saw on the previous page, and I am going to do quantitative research, primary quantitative research, to understand my brand tracking, how people think about my, what's my awareness level, my recognition, my recall. So do I remember the message, and can they play that message back to me? What imagery associations do we have? What attitudes do people have in the category, and how do they use a product? I can test a new product concept. How well will it be received in the market? And then I could look at the level of brand relationship in terms of how loyal people are, what people are willing to substitute, and then the attitudinal attachment that defines different levels of loyalty. So two buckets. So we'll start with qualitative first. So question for the group. Has anyone participated in a formal focus group where you were paid to participate? Does anyone? So Sasha, Michael, cool. Anybody else? So Michael, and then Sasha, what brand and what was the experience that you had?
So mine was more of a actually one-on-one interview versus full focus group, and it was with Intuit on their TurboTax software. So it was one of their program developers sitting down with me and just kind of walking me through my tax time up to that point, because I had used Intuit a bunch, or TurboTax a bunch, so
right.
Had experience with that, and then kind of teased some ideas that they were working towards for what I thought on usability.
And how long was your interview, and did you get paid?
I did get paid. I think it was probably like 25, something like that bucks, like a gift card of some sort. And I think it was probably a half hour or something like that. I forget the details. It was a couple years ago.
All right. How about you, Sasan? What was your experience?
Mine was pretty much the same exact thing as Mike's, except it was for Instagram business.
Oh.
But like literally the same exact stuff.
A one-on-one.
Yeah.
So that's a
But
big
I
deal.
got paid more handsomely. They gave me 200 for like 30 minutes, which was cool.
Usually, if you're going to be in a 90-minute to 2-hour focus group, they'll pay you between 100 and 200 bucks generally for that time. So, Michael, you were a deal for those guys. And I saw Austin, you had raised your hand. What did you have a question, or did you want to say something?
I was just going to say I had experience back home. KFC's headquarters is in Louisville.
Yeah, absolutely.
They do a bunch of like taste testing kind of things,
Yes.
surveys, and you come in there and they give you a couple of new products and they pay you to eat them. And at the time, I think it was they were doing that chicken sandwich thing with like 2 chicken breasts on each side. It was ridiculous.
Right.
But yeah, we had to try that. But they paid us for it, so it was cool.
Yeah, Frito-Lay used to do that. We at our plant in Irving, Texas, we had a taste panel, and we'd bring people in and constantly taste new products, just quick and dirty, and they get paid. So absolutely. So let me discuss a little bit about the focus groups. So focus groups are really important, and the real reason for success in a focus group is the moderator, because you usually get 6 to 10 pre-screen participants. So I'm looking for a focus group of women 25 to 44 who use laundry detergent. And I can use an equivalent group of men, because how men use laundry detergent or women might be very different. And I want to spend the time, so I don't call somebody out if it's a mixed group. But sometimes it is a mixed group. But a lot of times the groups tend to be men or women in many cases, because most of the time one focus group or two isn't worth the effort. Most companies will do focus groups in multiple cities. They'll do multiple groups in each city. And groups are expensive. They're about $5,000 a pop. Even today, and so if you do a dozen or 2 dozen focus groups, it's a big investment. But what's really important is that with focus groups is you really peel back the onion. You really understand how people think, behave, and the moderator, if they can avoid someone who has a very strong opinion in that focus group and make sure that they facilitate dialogue with a lot of folks, it really adds a lot of hypotheses, a lot of questions that you want to test quantitatively. Focus groups are not really projectable, meaning you can't really make the business decision to launch something on a focus group. However, you can use focus groups if you're using, let's say, you're testing a new TV commercial and you want to just not only get people's reaction to it, but you want to ask some more things. Are we talking to consumers the best way? So if that Kendall Jenner commercial with Pepsi about 4 years ago, where she for the social protest, she put the flower and brought the gun in the gun of the police officer in full riot gear, and then brought the Pepsi there. It was really panned for being tone deaf. But if they had tested that with core target audiences as a disaster check, maybe they wouldn't have run it. So as a disaster check to know, you can use a focus group if it is so one-sided in the response. Otherwise, don't, it just lets you have some additional insights. There's free associations, and we'll talk about, the notion of a free association is kind of a wide open conversation. Is tell me what comes to mind when you think of things in a category and then moving out to a brand. And you can use those free associations to develop a mental map that considers a brand's strengths or weaknesses. And then there's a projective techniques, and I'll explain, things that, literally they'll put a image, 2 people talking in a certain context, and they'll ask you to fill in the bubble. What are they thinking? What are they saying to each other? How do I compare, this brand to a person, to a car, to an animal? Or one of the most interesting things of projective techniques is a study that was done by Nescafé in the 1930s against Maxwell House. So Nescafé was coming in from Europe into the United States. Nescafé was a kind of a coffee that you just you put in hot water and it dissolves, and you can drink it straight without having to brew it like you would a normal coffee like Maxwell House. So projective techniques help you kind of reveal true beliefs, and I'll share with you what the example was. All right, so an example of a free association is when you talk to consumers to understand, you know, what do they think of a brand like State Farm Insurance? So, you know, you learn certain things. It's associated with the color red, like Pepsi is red, or Pepsi is blue and Coke is red. For the whole notion of, you know, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. They're there because they're reliable, they're dependable, they have a good reputation, they've been around, they're responsive, they give you personal service and fast settlements. So all of a sudden you're building this story. Yeah, they offer home and auto insurance, but the important thing is, you know, and it's expensive. So State Farm is not the cheapest insurance, but because of the other parts of being a good neighbor, people feel like they're going to be taken care of. So it's really understanding what are the associations here, all right? And a lot of times these projective, you know, the free association techniques really help a lot to get a lot of things out. So when you think about brand personality or your different things, and if you guys do groups, like you kind of discuss one of the cases in a group, you're basically doing free association, right? So let me give you the Nescafe versus Maxwell House. This is one of the most famous marketing examples of all time. So they asked if you know, so Nescafe is labor saving versus, you know, they were going to come in and say, hey, it's instant coffee, boiling water, just stir it in, ready to go. And they thought it was going to be a perceived advantage, and I'll have to close that parentheses. But they did not, because it violated the consumer tradition of a homemade coffee. And it was a surprise to Nescafe because of what it showed that the Nescafe buyer to be. So for example, people who said, you know, if the person who bought home, which turned out to be the housewife in the mid-1930s, bought home Nescafe, they were 12 times more likely to be seen as a lazy individual than someone who bought Maxwell House. The fact that I need instant coffee means that the person fails to plan household purchases and scheduling well, because I'm going to do a shortcut to buy Nescafe versus spending the time to brew Maxwell House. Because the perception was this is an expensive product, that individual is not seen as thrifty. Only 4% said is thrifty. And because in 1936, the vast majority of people who were buying groceries for the house were housewives, look at that. If you buy Maxwell House, no one says you're not a good wife. 16% of people that were in these projection things said, this person is not a good wife. So, you know, so if you're Nescafe and you get this data and you're thinking, I'm going to sell against convenience, no. They had to sell against taste to compete against Maxwell House. If they sold against convenience, it was a lazy person who was failed to plan, who didn't save money, and was not a good person. That's an eye-opening experience. Now, you can't make a business decision, but you have clear hypotheses that you need to test to validate how true this is or not. So we look at the presidential election. So thankfully, we're all missing the debate right now, although some of you might be seeing it on another screen. If you looked at 2004 election between George Bush and John Kerry, a cross projection of, you know, what coffee would they drink, what computer would they buy, what car would they drive, where would they shop, where would they eat fast food, you could look at the Bush column versus the Kerry column. So when people said, I could go for a beer with George Bush, pretty clear from that. Kerry, more premium, a little more aloof, not as, healthier from the fast food perspective. The whole deal of whether it's Kmart versus Target, Target versus Kmart, which is the low of the low. Whether you're a mainstream car or a an import, very interesting. Now, I'm not going to ask you guys to complete the Trump versus Biden columns, but anyone who wants to send it to me, I'll be very intrigued, and I'm happy to aggregate and share if you guys along these dimensions. So you guys can shoot me a quick email saying, here's my what coffee Trump drinks or Biden drinks or technology that they, whether it could be a computer, a mobile phone brand, an auto brand, a retail brand, and a fast food brand. I think you probably, at least on the Trump side, we can all safely say McDonald's or Burger King there. So interesting dynamic. And it helps kind of define who these voters are that support one candidate versus another. Then,
Is that, oh, I'm so sorry. Is that more about like what you project that they would use, or more about what they do actually use?
No, what you project they use.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely. So this is what people said. Hey, if George Bush were to buy a car, he'd buy a Ford. Wouldn't buy a Chevy, he'd buy a Ford. John Kerry would have bought a, the consumer perception is that he's a higher end foreign car buyer. He's going to buy a BMW. So it'd be interesting if you guys, what you perceive, what you project that candidate to their brands versus what they actually buy. I just picked McDonald's and Burger King because it could be KFC as well. So another qualitative technique is if the brand were to come alive as a person, what are the personality characteristics? What would they do? What would they wear? How would you describe it? So a lot of times in qualitative research, you go to it could be part of a focus group, it could be just specifically on personality and values. You get hundreds of pictures, and you kind of assemble the pictures and imagery that you think this brand would be if they came alive. And so you could see, based on the 5 broad category buckets that we talked about, where the brands lie. Disney with sincerity, even though there's an exciting component to Disney, it is a sincere brand with all its characters. Apple's exciting, Schwab is confident, they perform, Lexus is more sophisticated, and Jeep is rugged. So kind of giving you a little bit of context there. You could put a whole host of other brands in different places, as examples as well. These are just a couple of examples. All right. So other experiential methods. So I want to make sure that we're on track because I want to get to IKEA. I want to take a break in about 10 minutes, 12 minutes, and then chat about IKEA before we break for the take-home midterm. So qualitative techniques include ethnographies. Steve Belloc talked about the ethnographies where they come and they follow you for several days, like they did with Tropicana. Home pantry tests. They'll come in and they'll look what's in your fridge, what's in your pantry, where are voids, and they talk about your diet, where you buy, when you buy certain products and services. There's in-store shopping tests where, like the supermarket, they track how you buy. Do you go up and down aisles? Do you do the perimeter? When you're looking at a category that you may not have a very strong brand, do you shop the shelf from top to bottom? Do you start in the center and go down and then go back up? Are you blind to different parts? So if I'm a marketer and I want my brand and you're in front of you, I don't want my brand at the bottom of the shelf or the top of the shelf because most people don't look there. Sometimes consumer diaries, they do this a lot with TV viewing. Sometimes it's written, sometimes they literally have a computer where you just input what you're watching. Sometimes you film certain things, so they kind of get a day in the life of you. And then neural methods where they literally hook you up. And this is a big thing. Professor DeMofte here at State, who teaches 627, he was really heavily involved in the first years he was here in neural research, and it's extraordinarily expensive. But they literally will plug you little devices, on your temples, in different parts of your scalp, because they want to track how your brain is reacting to different stimuli. And a lot of times you may say, I don't like this brand, but your brain says, I want to know more. And so over time, when neural research methods become less expensive, so some of you have seen, they've been advertising this app on TV where I can literally put my finger on the app and it'll tell me, and it will give me a full cardiac profile, $99. So I know all the time what my heart is doing by putting my finger on my mobile device, right? So there'll be neural methods that'll be a lot less expensive than they are now, but they are the true way of understanding people, how they emote based on the stimuli that they're receiving. So they may say, this doesn't do much for me, but really it does. So it gives you, and this is, in a certain way, how they do political ads. So when we look at consumer insights that come out of qualitative or quantitative research, what is the insights that we're looking to ensure? That they're fresh, that they're relevant, that they strike a chord with a customer, that they have the ability to be enduring, meaning they're sustainable over a long period of time, and that ultimately they're inspiring. Okay. So let me talk about quantitative. Quantitative. The most important thing is that I want to focus on this page is the testing methodologies. You want to make sure that the different kinds of quantitative studies are consistent and repeatable, and that your sample sizes are statistically significant. So for market research, and let's say you're looking at a national sample, ideally no less than 400 people are being interviewed to get to a 95% confidence interval at a broad national sample rating. The minute you start breaking it down, male, female, income levels, education levels, you need a bigger sample size to get a small subsample of men or women, or higher income, lower income, college grad, not college grad, and so on. The minimum, even though the central limit theorem in math says over 100 is a good directional case. In market research, you need to have at least a couple hundred respondents to feel comfortable enough that the aggregate research around 200 people is going to give you some key direction. There's different ways to track awareness or image-related quantitative research. We talked a lot about the awareness level of, but for example, when you're in store, they have eye tracking techniques that track when you're in front of a shelf where your eye goes. If there's packaging, they'll test packaging, and they'll want to see where your eye goes. Does it go to the brand? Does it go to the product descriptor? Does it go to, where does it go? Does it go here, up and down, or whatever? But there's a lot of different ways to drive awareness. And then from an imagery standpoint, the whole idea is, how do we scale to get a response around imagery? So we can look at measures like along the list of attributes, which does somebody prefer? Well, let me see if there's a question. Yes. Do they have to tell you if you're being tracked? Yes. So all of this is, you're agreeing to participate in some kind of study. They're not just kind of following you in the store and seeing kind of what you're doing. You've agreed. They try to be not obtrusive because they have to track you with the technology. But no, absolutely. For any quantitative research, you have to know you're being asked to do something. There's ranges that, you guys have seen, how much do you agree or disagree, or on a scale of 1 to 7, forced rankings. So, hey, of these 5 attributes, which is the most important to you, second, third, or fourth? And then degrees of purchase intent. How likely are you to buy a product or service? So these are the various studies. Now I'm going to focus on a couple. We talked a lot about brand tracking. The bread and butter study of every marketer is the attitude and usage survey. Sometimes they call it the usage and attitude survey. And basically it combines a little bit of a brand tracking study with measuring attitudes toward brands, how people are engaged with the category, how customers use the products or services in the category. And generally these are 25, 30-minute interviews, whether they're online or mall intercept or phone interviews. And this is where you need 400 and above sample sizes. This is the one single tool that, if you think of yourself as a doctor, is your stethoscope. You kind of get a sense of what's the heart, what's happening with this person. This is your core diagnostic tool as a marketer. You can do brand loyalty studies that can, look at, the purchase mix percentage now and in the future of within a certain brand. You could do brand segmentation studies. How do different segments? How do, we looked at last week with MetaBiCal. How do women between 25 and 44 behave versus 35 to 65? And the more detail we have, this is very important in when we did the Dove case study, and there'll be some segmentation work next week with Samsung. Brand substitutability. If you're not buying my brand, what brand do you buy? And if my brand is not available, will you wait? Or will you buy somebody else? And if so, who? The last study, and this is through Boston Consulting Group, is the whole concept of Net Promoter Score. Net Promoter is interesting because they ask you, and this is, if you buy anything at a grocer, a drug retailer, a fast food thing, at the bottom of your receipt, there's always, take the study or take a short survey. Generally, it's a Net Promoter Score survey, and they're going to ask you 2 questions, and only 2. Number 1 is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how did you like the product or service that you just purchased? 10, I loved it. 1, I hated it. Everything in between. The second question is, would you recommend the brand to a family member or colleague? Would you recommend the brand? 1 to 10. 10, I would absolutely, without equivocation. 1, never in a million years. How a Net Promoter Score is calculated is the following. If you rate on would you recommend a 9 or a 10, you're considered a promoter. If you rate it 7 or an 8, even if you're a hard grader, you're a passive. And 1 to 6, you're a detractor. And what they do is the Net Promoter Score can go from -100 to +100. And what they do is they take all the people who, scored you 9 and 10, what percent of the people, all the people who scored you 7 and 8. So everyone who scores you 9 or 10 gets 1 point. People who are the percent that scored you 7 or 8 get 0, so they all go away. And people who are detractors are -1. So let's say that your brand, your local craft brew, gets a 40% of the people are promoters. They would recommend your brand. Okay. Let's say 40% of the people are passives. They give you, pretty good grade, 7 or 8, but that's 0. And 20% of the people would think it really sucks. So 40% love it and are promoters, 20% are detractors. And what you do is you take promoters minus detractors and that's your Net Promoter Score. So your Net Promoter Score for this particular instance would be 20. We worked with a wealth management firm, very large wealth management firm, and across their offices, they had a Net Promoter Score of 49 to 80. So extraordinarily good Net Promoter Score, really great service. We worked with a global energy company, and their Net Promoter Score was negative 52. So Stephanie asks the question, can this be applied to the 5-point scale, such as a 5-star Yelp reviews? Not to give you a Net Promoter Score. It can't be scaled down, because the very few people are just going to give you a 3, which is where it doesn't scale the same way as a 1 to 10 scale. And I'm sure they tested it extensively with 1 to 5, because people use 1 to 5, 1 to 7, 1 to 10. And there was a reason why BCG selected the 1 to 10 scale. And you're assuming this is something that must be benchmarked against. Yes. So it's interesting. There's some pretty straightforward things. Yes, you can look at them against the industry. Does everyone have a negative Net Promoter Score or a positive? But generally, rule of thumb, negative, really bad. Whether you're -1 or -100, you got a long way to go. And you have to understand why. Because people will say, would you recommend brand X? Give me a rating. And the open-ended is always why or why not. And so people, give you reasons. 0 to 20, you're on the board, but you have a lot of, upgrade to do. So you're not horrible, closer to 20 is better than closer to 0. 20 to 50, you're a solid brand. You're north of 50, you're a rock star. So you're, and the big thing is that you look at your Net Promoter Score over time, determining whether that promoter score is kind of flat, increasing, or declining. That's really critical. Hopefully you're, let's see, there's a question. Let's see. Okay. Is there a way? So great question, Gabriel. I think they need to snapshot to understand the Net Promoter Score overall. If when people do these surveys online, there's always, in many instances, if you leave us your email address, you could be entered into a sweepstakes. And then there's always the question, may we follow up with you? Whether it's a Net Promoter Score or any other kind of survey, because they're blind. So you're going to get paid up front for one of the big surveys. You're not getting paid for the Net Promoter Score. And so they might ask, may we follow up? And so it's up to you in terms of the longitudinal, in terms of the Net Promoter Score. But if you're, what a company does, like let's say McDonald's or In-N-Out or Jack in the Box, this is almost like an ongoing longitudinal score in terms of the Net Promoter Score, and they see how it trends over time versus any of these individual studies that give you a big amount of information, and then you repeat it at different intervals. So although we talked about brand tracking studies being done fairly quickly, being done on a fairly regular basis, that attitude and usage study, it used to be that A&U studies were good for about 3 years. Nowadays, because of the speed of the market, 18 to 24 months, you stretch it beyond 24 months, the information starts to become less relevant. All right, so let me, as I'm thinking about the exam, I need to get to one area here, and then we can, so, a lot of different approaches. One area that's interesting that you guys probably did in statistics class, and that, is a secondary study. So if your marketing, or if your research team is big enough, the conjoint analyses are pretty good, because what it does is it creates a forced preference between brands or between attributes within a brand. So you can test things like, hey, if our brand is promoted by the Good Housekeeping Seal of Approval, or by the J.D. Power survey, or by Consumer Reports, does that elevate? Is that important to a consumer or a customer? And if so, how important is it in the ranking of things? You could test brand name, you could test, your core differentiating aspect of a product, whatever it is. But consumers make a clear trade-off, and then you're able to determine, well, then I should advertise, that I should really use the J.D. Power survey in my survey. That's why automotive companies really aggressively use J.D. Power, because that's an extraordinarily credible resource that consumers believe elevates the value of a car. The last thing that I'll focus on before I get into the brand asset evaluator model is around loyalty. And I think the things that we really want to think about in particular is on the left-hand side here of that says, what are the 4 dimensions of brand resonance? So there's behavioral loyalty in terms of attitudinal attachment, sense of community, active engagement. So if you're actively engaged in a brand, you're an evangelist. So I can be loyal to a brand. If someone says, hey, what do you think of this brand? You'll pipe up and say, hey, it's a good brand. Attitudinal attachment is that you're more proactive in promoting a brand. Hey, I love this brand. You tell people anytime you talk about beer, I love Miller. I love, Sierra Nevada. I love whatever it happens to be. Sense of community is if you engage in the brand's social media or other platforms and engage with others about your common bond for the brand. And active engagement is that you are a standalone person. So when Dove did the user-generated content, or Doritos did the ads for the Super Bowl, and people spent their own money out of pocket. So some of those ads that Doritos ran were produced by the individuals. They just ran that ad. So people spent a lot of money out of their own pocket to enter a contest with a very low chance to win, to express what they feel about Doritos or what they feel about Dove, right? So that's really critical in this space. And okay, so let's talk about brand asset evaluator, and this is important because as a marketer, we have to think about, you have a budget, and there's different ways to allocate that budget. You can do qualitative research, quantitative research, by syndicated research, or by a commercially viable model. And one of the best ones in all of marketing is the brand asset evaluator model. There's 4, so there's a couple of things that we need to know about the brand asset evaluator. So and this is similar to our 2x2 differentiating matrix, where it says, at the bottom, when we talked about the brand positioning framework and the points of parity and points of difference, when we look at differentiation on the horizontal axis and relevance to the customer on the y-axis, the higher differentiation, the higher relevance in the upper right-hand quarter is a point of difference. Similar in structure, but they look at it a little bit differently. They talked about energized differentiation. There's 4 quadrants. There's relevance. So what's the appeal to the target? What's the momentum of the brand is differentiated, energized differentiation. And then, and we'll talk about the role of these. What's the esteem? How well regarded and respected is the brand? And how much knowledge, how familiar are we with the brand? So it's not just awareness, it's unaided awareness and the kind of recall of the brand message. How big is this from a commercial basis that you would want to buy? So it was developed in '93. It's done every quarter across 51 countries, almost 1 million consumers. They track 45,000 brands along 72 parameters, of which 48 are image oriented. So the data is really, really rich and really, really deep. And not only can you look at brands within your category, but you can look at other competitive brands outside your category to understand certain trends on brands. And you can look at different categories simultaneously or just one category at a time. So let's take a look at the, so when they look at so there's 2 components. So there's 4 dimensions, 2 components. Energized differentiation and relevance are an indicator of brand strength. And it's a leading indicator. It's the future growth value of a brand. So how relevant is to a target and what's the momentum that we have, that signals my brand is strong, weak, indifferent, whatever. The esteem and knowledge, very important, but it's a current or lagging indicator that says, you know what, this is my current operating value. People like me, people know me, they know my message, but I might not be as relevant anymore. And this is the big thing with Sony. Sony is all about people knowing them. They want people to be aware of the Sony brand. But energized differentiation and relevance, they've lost it to Samsung and Apple. So if you plot this, brand stature, which is a combination of esteem and knowledge, is on the x-axis. Brand strength, which is differentiated, energized differentiation and relevance, is on the y-axis. So you could look at these quadrants and say, hey, in this quadrant, it's new and unfocused brand. Low stature, low strength, it's new. High brand strength, you still haven't built the awareness. These are niche brands that have a lot of momentum. So Tesla could have been there a couple of years ago. You move over to the upper right-hand corner, high stature, high strength. These are the power leaders, and then we have to think about power leaders versus declining leaders. So power leaders are on the top half of the line, declining leaders are on the bottom half of the line. These guys are on the way out, and then commodity and eroded brands are in the lower right-hand quadrant. High stature, people know them, but nobody cares about them. Now I'm going to skip these. This gives you an example. Unfocused, believe it or not, AOL's made the whole circuit from being growing, leading, to eroding, to nobody knows and cares. The Athlete's Foot, Time Out New York, which is no longer in business. Growing, Yelp, Kindle, Lululemon Method, the organic cleaning products, W Hotels, leaders, Apple, IKEA, HBO, Under Armour on the top, and Under Armour right now is having some problems, so they may have gone down to the declining leaders. Sony and GM used to be at the top, now they're moving down, and then eroding brands, that are have people know Blockbuster. There's only one store left in Oregon. Shell, TV Guide, American Airlines, Sprint, which just sold to T-Mobile. All right. So with that, it is 20 till. We're gonna take 5 minutes. So it will come back at a quarter till. I'm gonna approach IKEA a little differently. And I am gonna ask, Alex, are you here? Alexander Height?
I am.
All right. I'm going to ask you to kind of just take us through some ideas. I'll kind of take you through it, and then I want to get your feedback. We'll talk for about 15 minutes. While we take a break, I'm going to activate the exam. What I did with the exam is that I put it all on one, so you could see the whole exam, as opposed to one question at a time. But you have an hour and 15 to take it, but you have one attempt. You don't have multiple attempts, okay? So I'm going to mute my mic and I'm going to shut the camera down, give you guys 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and Alex, we'll start with you and talk a little bit about IKEA. So everyone back in 5. All right. So we are back. So we'll chat for about 10 or 12 minutes. And so Alex, and I'll do a little summary after our speaker next week. And then what we'll do next week is we'll go after the speaker. We'll do the Samsung case. We'll talk a little bit about IKEA, because I'm hoping, if not next week, the following week, I'll have all the exams back to everybody, plus whoever next week that said they'd submit Samsung, I'll have that back as well. All right, so Alex, if we're looking at IKEA, and what I'd like to do is on the whiteboard is and we'll erase. Let me close. Take this. Let's minimize you guys this time. I'm gonna erase. Okay, so we'll do text. So I'd like to know from you, what's great about shopping at IKEA? What makes IKEA a great place to shop?
Alex, you're muted.
So, pardon?
Yes, I am. I was unmuted, or I was
Okay.
muted.
Yes. What's great about shopping at IKEA?
I mean, there's several reasons. So, but I wanted to ask a question first. Where's
Yeah.
the midterm link posted? Because I'm on Blackboard and I just don't see it
Oh,
yet.
not till 9 o'clock.
Oh, all right, fantastic.
So I'm not leaving anybody. I want to make sure that at 9 o'clock when we stop and you guys can look at the link, that everyone, that if a few of you see it, then everyone should be able to see it. But that at 9 o'clock we'll break. So go ahead.
Well, let me pull up my thing. So one of the best parts about shopping at IKEA is that it's, low price compared to others.
Okay.
The ability to me, one of the best things is that I can ship or move the furniture myself, so I don't have to ship it, and it comes, and then I can assemble it inside. It's the whole experience of welcoming, as well as they have the like from start to finish, where you walk through, you're guided through their showroom, as well as there's zero pressure from the sales side. So I don't get that pushy salesman trying to sell me a certain piece of furniture or anything like that. And where it's
Okay.
me being able to decide on my own. Then
I can take home the furniture that day. What else? Anything
Right.
else? These are good.
There's also one of the things mentioned was the childcare aspect, which is not really offered many other places. The ability to be able to shop without a child, and as a
As a
dad with
parent, yep.
it's a lot easier to be able to drop the kid off and not have to worry about what's going on with them during that. It takes the stress off of shopping for furniture, which always could be a higher stress environment.
Absolutely. Anything else?
Let's see what else. That's all that I have currently.
Okay, that's good. Who else? Gabriel, what about you?
Well, they have restaurant. They also have banking.
And they didn't mention on the case, but yes, I know they do. So, but let's stay with the data in the case. Anything else that they offer that's different? Oh, let me see who raised their hand. Sorry about that. Aaron, how about you?
They have the showroom, so people can actually like try out the furniture and lounge on it. Yeah.
Good. Lounge on it. Okay. Who else had? Ruth, how about you?
The Scandinavian design and style that they have.
Yep, absolutely. So these are good. These are really good reasons of why this is a good place. It's, low price, Scandinavian design. The showrooms are great. They have everything. what can you buy at an IKEA that you can't buy anywhere else in terms of the showroom? Does anyone know that? Okay. You could buy the accessories. So you could buy everything in the showroom. You can't buy the accessories in the high-end retailer, just the furniture. So let's say there. So Alex, let me ask you, where's my text? There we go. So why do people hate shopping at IKEA? What makes the experience not a good one? Just out of curiosity, do you have an opinion there?
I don't know if hate's the right word, but one of the things that could be an issue is the fact that because I can take home the furniture today, that means that I have to have a vehicle that can transport it. So if I have a Mini Cooper, IKEA is not the place for me.
Right. So yeah, vehicle. You need a vehicle. Okay. So that's a little bit of a challenge for some folks. What else is not a good experience about shopping at IKEA?
The other thing, so I know that there are varying levels of skill in terms of craftsmanship, and so having to depend on myself or the customer has to depend on their ability to assemble it. So it may not be as, like, it may become broken in the process to be assembled.
So we have to assemble it. Has anyone, you guys can do a show of hands. I'm just curious. Has anyone been very frustrated in assembling furniture from IKEA? Okay. So Teresa, you raised your hand. What was your experience?
Actually, it wasn't myself. It was my roommate, and she was trying to build a desk, and it had like a keyboard tray, and she actually ended up snapping it in half, trying to get it into the correct like pegs in the desk.
No fun. How about you, Alexandra?
I had to build a dresser, and since they use like the cheaper quality materials like inside where people can't see, so like the bottom of dresser drawers, I kept having the issue where like when I'd pull the dresser drawer out, my clothes would just fall through like the crack in the back.
Oh, how about that? That's so they'll use inferior materials, and the internal part, and better stuff on the outside. Okay, any other reasons why people may dislike shopping at IKEA? Gabriel?
I was just adding on to the furniture that the instructions, I think it's just drawings. It's not like words in the instructions.
So the instructions might be difficult to interpret.
Yeah.
Another side of it is the lack of service. There's very little staff on the actual floor. So if you're looking for something or you have questions, it's a little more difficult to actually get those answered.
Okay. Sasan, how about you?
Something I touched on in my paper is like for the shopper who might be looking for like an express shopping experience, IKEA isn't really suitable for them due to like the design layout.
And what do you mean an express? What do you mean by an express shopping experience?
Like, let's just say I want to get in and out to grab, I don't know, call it like a salt shaker. Like I might have to walk through the whole path to go grab that.
Yeah, so you need to walk through the store. And if you've got small kids and you drop them off, hey, I'll take my time. I can lay on the bed, take a nap, but no, I'm on a mission and I'm time constrained, it's a different experience. Rachel, how about you?
I was just going to say their larger items are really heavy. So if I were going there by myself, there's no way I could get a dresser and get that into my car and up the stairs and put together by myself.
Gotcha. Stephanie, how about you?
Just to kind of speak to the actual shopping experience, because it is like laid out differently than really any store ever, it can actually become more confusing for shoppers because they have no frame of reference.
So they could be, so it's confusing and no frame of reference. There's like no windows and no doors. Like it's like the haunted house at Disneyland.
Yeah.
Okay. Windows or doors, you know, that you can get out. And David, how about you?
After you buy an item, there's no like post-purchase support in terms of like hauling away an item that you may be replacing. You're just gonna have to figure that out on your own.
So you need to dispose. You need to dispose of current furniture.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Does anyone have any other positive thing about IKEA, just out of curiosity?
It's very like, although a lot of these are negatives for someone, if you go in with that knowing that it's very experience focused. I referred to it almost like a adult Disneyland to an extent, if you enjoy putting things together, or a giant dollhouse with going through all of the rooms and looking at things.
Right. So, you know, it's interesting. So IKEA, so out of curiosity, and how many of you have bought something from IKEA in the last 2 years? So I want to see hands up. Everyone who has, I'm just curious, I'm going to go down this list. So a number of you. So for those of you, so for example, let me so Aaron, what was your purchase and what was your experience like? And then we'll kind of call it after your comment.
So my purchase was a little like side table bookshelf. But I think I ended up getting a couple other things. So my experience was, once I was in there, I saw a few more items that I got too. But it was enjoyable.
It was enjoyable. You enjoyed it.
Yeah.
How long were you in the store when all is said and done?
Oh God. I can't really remember. Probably like 30 minutes.
Okay, so you had a mission. And you try to get out reasonably quickly. Okay, I'll throw Ruth in. How about you? And then we'll call it for tonight.
I actually have an order on the way too.
What's that?
I actually also have an order on the way.
Oh, okay.
But I got a dresser. That was the most recent, and I believe online. Instead of in store.
Sure. So these guys, on top of you have to carry it out, you have to assemble it. There's no credit, no delivery, no furniture removal, and then we'll talk about next week. When we kind of talk IKEA. I'm going to be interested in hearing everyone's experience in terms of how does IKEA stack up against the furniture industry, and who are IKEA's customers. And IKEA, even though the case doesn't, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of data, there's a ton of insights that you could pull, both kind of make assumptions demographically, but there's a lot of psychographic and behavioral information in the case about the kind of individual that shops at IKEA, and kind of a little bit IKEA's mindset of what's the relationship that they want to have with the customer. So we'll talk a little bit about that next week in relation to the U.S. furniture industry, and how many of you you guys looked at the lamp ad. Tori, I'm going to ask you that question, and then I'm going to see if everyone can get to the midterm. Tori, did you watch the lamp ad?
Didn't we watch that in class?
No, I put in the link in the questions that I sent yesterday.
Oh, you know what, sir? I apologize. I did not. I thought that was something different.
Okay. Ruth, did you see it?
Yes, I did.
So what did you, what struck you about that ad?
I guess the whole premises, the feeling bad for the lamp on the street.
Yeah,
And
so
then
I
at
mean-
the end, it was, I guess I kind of knew that was coming because I read the case before I saw the,
Right, the ad.
but if I didn't, I would have not expected someone to say like, you're crazy for feeling sad. Because I kind of felt like the lamp was lonely.
Right. All right, what I'm gonna do is I do, Rachel, that's pretty good. I like it. So I'm gonna, so I'd like to ask, can everyone go to Blackboard in the assignment section, the very bottom, it should say midterm. Can everyone currently access it? Yes or no?
I can see it, yes.
Okay.
I can see
So
it.
it is available. So what I'd like to do, I'm going to stop sharing the screen. I'm going to remain here. And you guys are absolutely now welcome to migrate and take the exam. So if you have questions, you can send me a message in the chat and I'll reply. If necessary, I'll put you in a separate room so we can, I can answer a specific question. Okay. So I'm going to leave. So I'll allow you guys to, yes. And Ruth, the Samsung case is due next week for write-up. So anyone who has a Samsung case in their listing, you have to turn that in next week. So remember, we have a speaker. We'll do the Samsung case, and then if we have time, we'll talk about brand architecture strategies, and we'll talk about the IKEA case. Making sure that everyone has access. You guys can begin. If you have questions, send me a chat privately, and then if we need to talk, I'll put you in a group, and you and I can chat. Okay. So good luck to everyone. When you're done and you hit save and submit, make sure you don't exit the exam because then it'll stop at 75 minutes and it'll record you a 0. So make sure you go through it, save and submit. It'll score you, so you'll see your score immediately, but then you can leave the, you could decide if you want to leave the current Zoom meeting. I'll be on until at least 10 o'clock. Okay. So good luck to all of you. I'll see you guys next week. And then I'll just hang out until if anyone has questions.
Professor, can I chat with you real quick?
Yes. Sorry about that. Yes, Austin, try to start over. If it kicked you out and you didn't submit, let me know if you can or cannot.
I can't.
You cannot.
No, I can't.
Okay. That's a good boy. Evil. You kicked you off. Let me see something here. Hold on a sec. It shows that your attempt is in progress. It doesn't show that you it shows, let's see here, how much of it did you, I'm looking at your, so where did it kick you out? At number 20, it looks like?
Yes.
All right, so here's what I'm gonna do. You could see the exam, correct?
No.
No, you cannot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you so I'm going to keep you. Okay, I'll send you the in a Word file, questions 20 to 30, and you need to send it back to me in as quickly as possible.
Okay.
All right, so it'll come through Blackboard. Let me do that right now. It'll take me a minute to get it going. All right, Austin. I need you to answer those questions, send it back to me, and then delete the exam, because normally, you know, I don't let the students keep the exam. So that I need your, you know, your
No
word that you're
problem.
going to do that. Okay. Just confirm that you receive it. I sent it through Blackboard.
I got it.
All right, very good.
Professor, I emailed back my answers.
All right, very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
All right, good luck.